I know! A dragon head with a maggot green body. How? I'll tell you. I'll tell you. First, to remind you what happens to us dragons. We never die. Be too easy. If you do slay us, you must drain out our blood. Otherwise we're not dead. And after a millennia of eons, we return to what we always were. Rock. And the fierce blood in us goes back into the centre of the world, from where it came. So this entire planet is just a layer upon layer of dragon. And so it would have been with me. I grew tired. I crept across to the end of a land, a narrow peninsula, down by the sea, across the way from here. And I slept. And I would have slept for good. But then he came. I felt him in my magma dreams. A little furtive man. He'd heard the legend of the treasure. Didn't believe in me. Came slowly, slowly, slowly into my land. Looked up, saw me, thought himself so very brave. And stole it! I felt it in my dreams. All of you know, I am sure, that we dragons have something at our hearts. The first jewel we were given as a wormling. The living heart of our horde. And this he took. And I felt it. I felt it in my dreams. And it made the magma in me. The magma that was dying. The magma that was even now oozing. Should have been oozing out of my body. Course up into my head, and I lived. I felt my youth again. As a creeping, crawling thing, I leapt out into the planets and found they had changed. Men had spread, formed a great Gaiath kingdom in the south, and there where once there had been wilderness, there was a town. And I fell on it like a thunderclap, burning, yearning for my gem, looking, but I found it not. All I found was men who resisted me. So I burnt and burnt again. And then as dragons must, I ate the men and the maidens left, and went back to my cave. And I would have perhaps gone to sleep, and stayed there, for my fire was quenched. But this land was not like any other. For 50 winters it had been governed by some great ruler, who as a hero had murdered monsters and their mothers in lands to the north. He had slain them. And now he governed past dotage, when normally the earls would have got rid of him. But so great a hero had he been, none dared touch him, but all his nephews schemed. The wild ale things like wolves went round his throne, and now they gathered in council. And the chief of his nephews said, "Our great king must fight this monster." And the people agreed. And so it was. They persuaded their old champion to put on his aged hauberk, to take the sword that he had stolen from the monsters, the sword that Wayland had made, and march off into the wilderness. Well, an army marched with him, but by the time they came to my lands, there was about a tithe left. And by the time they came to the cave mouth of my kingdom, none but he and 2 nephews. The eldest, the one who had schemed against him, who was coming along just to make sure of his own. And the youngest, moved perhaps by love or romance, for he had poetry in his heart, and it is by his words you know the tale. Well, the 3 came down into my lands. I saw them, but I was tired. I thought I might hide, but then I looked again, and the eldest nephew. I looked at his greed. He was looking around, looking thirsty, wanting more of my treasure, and I grew angry. Fire leapt from my mouth like a storm. I blew his cinder into the air, blew it across their world. And when I did it, I heard the mighty hero say, "This is now personal. I must take this mighty worm." But his nephew, who was a wave-faced boy, said, I cannot, and he hid behind a rock. And the great hero stepped forward, and I reckoned up to him. Oh, that was an epic battle. Not because either of us were any good. Rather, we were both so old and so tired, none of our blades nor strikes held true. We just battered the air, occasionally scratched each other. Blows that would in our youth have eviscerated one another, backwards and forwards, until we were exhausted. I thought, perhaps, that we might just collapse claw into hand and hold each other, so tired and old were we. But the sword he had drawn, the sword of Wayland, was not a sword like any other. It would not go back in this scabbard, not until it had the blood of some foe upon it. And so it seemed, one time when I lunged out and was quite exposed, the sword itself freed itself from the aged warrior's hand and struck me down. Struck a great blow on my neck, not a mortal blow, but enough to bleed, enough to make my fierce blood fall upon the ground, and then I felt a third time the fury. And as a hurricane, I bolted out, such a blaze as to burn the warrior, turn his hauberk to molten metal, turn his body to blackened cinders, turn all save the sword of Wayland, which he just notched. And then in tiredness I collapsed, for in truth the fire that had come into my head had ripped through the cut the sword had made, making it wider and yet wider. And I bled, exhausted. But just then, as my fires died, the youngest nephew, was upon me, incompetently holding the sword of Wayland. He hacked fully 30 times through my head, cutting it off at last. But the wave-faced fool forgot what dragons are. He did not drain out the blood, but rather pitched my head in the old howl on the bear of his mighty forebear, and took me off to the pyre of his king. And there they burned their warrior and sealed my wound, catching my blood in my head, keeping me for all time. And then they discarded my body up on the mound, and there I lay ahead, while I watched war carry away their kingdom, the sword of the Wayland smithy, the sword of Wayland being led to great vengeance amongst the folk, till their blood flowed and the people vanished. And there I stayed, devouring sheep as I found them, until I grew myself a new body. A dragon without a body. And then men came and found me, sold me for a freak show. And so I wander the world, looking, neither alive nor dead, looking always for that living gem. If you find it, return it to me. Return it, that I might rest at rest.